Hello, welcome to the channel. Reviewing movie stuff. This is going to be a review of this new horror movie Together, written and directed by Michael Shanks, a man that I have never heard of, and starring Dave Franco and Allison Brie. I was quite excited for this movie. It made a pretty big impression at Sundance, kind of like the buzziest film out of that festival. Body horror is kind of having a moment, especially after last year with The Substance, which is not only like critically successful and obviously earned a lot of Oscar nominations, but also kind of felt like a phenomenon. And maybe I'm just like too in the weeds of, film Twitter and like movie nerd culture, but felt like a pretty significant cinematic experience in 2024. So going into this film, there was a lot of reasons to be quite excited about it, and I left a little bit disappointed, but still thought it was pretty fun. I'll talk about the positives first. The first one being the style of this movie. I think visually it looks really, really good. The premise is that these two people in kind of a codependent relationship experience this odd thing while on a hike and then start to sort of fuse together. And as an elevator pitch premise, that's really, really interesting. But they even elevate upon that, mining every exciting scenario that you could find out of this premise and doing so in a very visually interesting way. Lots of textured compositions within this film, lots of very meticulous and beautiful looking framing, and a lot of well-conceived, well-constructed sequences. I particularly like the whole shower/car sequence where Dave Franco is moving every time Allison Brie turns her car. I thought that was a really clever idea and was constructed really well within the editing. The visual effects are very significant within body horror, and I don't think this is on the level of, say, Cronenberg or The Substance, but it did make me uneasy, grossed me out a little bit, which I think is really the whole point of a body horror film, especially as it started to get gnarlier near the third act. The film is also paced quite well. It moves very slowly. It sets up the couple, it sets up the themes, which I'll get into later. It eases you into the horror. A lot of lore within this film, like a lot of explaining why this is happening. And typically I find that to be a little annoying and kind of distracting within a horror film. I just kind of want to get into the scares and get into what this means thematically. But I did think a lot of the lore expansion was pretty smart and was delivered efficiently enough so that it didn't feel like it was kind of taking up too much of the runtime. Sometimes the script is a little bit too obvious about what it's about, which is about, people in codependent relationships. And this kind of very modern relationship where people don't really label things and almost don't know who they are to each other. So it's like this weird nebulous relationship that everyone around them is sort of uncomfortable with, and they themselves just sort of have trouble communicating with each other. And then this obviously leads to codependence and over-reliance upon each other, which is really what is at the core of this film, is Franco's character feeling this dependency on Allison Brie's character. I love horror movies that are using their scares and their concepts to say something interesting about, humanity or emotions or something like psychologically intriguing to me. And this is just a really great concept that works well with the themes this film is tackling. It also makes sense that you cast a real life couple in this film, and Dave Franco and Allison Brie are doing pretty good jobs. I'll get to Allison Brie first. I'm a bit more of a mixed bag on Dave Franco. First, I want to say that it's great they got two actors who are both comedically talented, who have a comedic background, because this movie is quite funny. A lot of scenes where they are, again, poking fun at this very specific modern type of couple. They call each other babe a lot, and at first I thought this is a little weird. Why are they throwing this in so much? It's a little awkward, but then I realized that's literally intentional. They're trying to make this couple very cringy, and Franco and Brie play that really, really well. Their chemistry together is great. You immediately buy them as a couple and understand why they have this inherent attraction to each other, but they also work out all of the odd aspects of this relationship really well too. I don't have much negative to say about Allison Brie in this film, but I do have a quick nitpick about Dave Franco's performance, which I think is generally pretty solid, but he does this thing in all of his performances, really. I think it's most clear in 21 Jump Street and in his cameo in the studio this year, where he every time he yells, it sounds like he's either about to cry or he's really constipated. It's just a weird quirk in his performance style and in just the way that he talks. And because this film is a bit more dramatic, a bit more intense than most of his performances, he does this a lot in this film. And sometimes it works, in the more emotional scenes, it makes sense that this guy is on the verge of tears. But there's also just moments where he's explaining things intensely where it just comes off a little strange and honestly like a little bit difficult to understand what he's saying. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I did start to find it a bit distracting, specifically in the third act. My other complaint about this film has to do with the sound in general, both with the sound design and the score, which are just a little too busy, a little bit too loud. I think a lot of these moments could have used some silence to them. Whenever there's a jump scare, there's like that loud boom or shrill string that is just kind of obnoxious and so cliche for horror films. And the score is very overbearing and emotionally manipulative. Obviously, the whole point of a score within a film is to let the audience know how they should feel about a specific scene. But at some point, it gets distracting and it gets to just be too much, and that's very much the case in this film. So many scenes where the emotions are clear and the audience is aware of what these actors are trying to convey and what the script is trying to convey, and yet there's just this really cloying score playing over all of it. I just find these scores to really talk down to the audience and really make me feel like the filmmakers think we're dumb and we don't really know how we're supposed to feel. And so that was probably the most frustrating aspect of the film. And then in some of the more exciting, thrilling moments, there is a lot of loud sound design, a lot of like bodies squishing or like crunching together, I guess, in tandem with this very bombastic score that just was too much. There was just too much going on. It was a very overstimulating experience that I keep coming back to this word. I found it to be distracting. I felt the filmmakers didn't have enough confidence in the performances, in the script, in the visuals, and as a result, they were trying to do too much with the sound here and with the score here in a way that really detracts from the quality of the film. Because this is a really solid script, and despite the nitpicks I had about Dave Franco, these performances are really great, and the premise is solid, but I think some of the technical aspects don't work all that well. And as a result, I found this to be a pretty fun time, a lot of, crazy body horror shenanigans, and a very strange, somewhat baffling ending that I had mixed feelings about, but thought was kind of a bold way to take this film. And ultimately, I had a good time, but I definitely think some of the formal aspects of the filmmaking could have used a bit more work. So I would give this a 3 out of 5. And that's really all I gotta say. Go watch it together if you want to. Let me know what you think about it. And more movie reviews coming soon. So, check out those. And yeah, bye-bye.